It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. The Mark Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Mark is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Mark Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for our weekly discussion of the important legal and political issues of the day. You're welcome to call in at 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580. You can send me a tweet at Mark Scaringi, and I'll read your tweet on the air. For all my columns, prior podcasts of the show, and a look at some great merchandise we have, check out the markscaringishow.com, our own website. Isn't that exciting? Today, we're broadcasting again on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live, so if you're a friend or a follower, you can comment live on Facebook, and we'll read your comments and communicate with you via Facebook, and you can call in live on the air. Well, Election Day is just 3 days from today. President Trump has been hitting the campaign trail hard for many weeks now. He's working as hard as he can to support Republican candidates on Tuesday. Yesterday, he appeared in the state of Indiana to support congressional candidates there and Mike Braun, who's challenging the incumbent Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly. Mike Braun is a few points up in the polls. It was another one of the president's raucous rallies. The president managed to get legendary coach of the Indiana Hoosiers basketball team, Bobby Knight, to appear at the rally, and Trump called him up on the stage by saying that it was Knight who urged him to run for president, and that they had a great romance. An interesting turn of phrase the president likes to use. Coach Knight took the podium and declared that Trump has been a great defender of the United States of America. Coach Knight led the chant, "Go get him, Donald." Well, how is the president framing the election contest on Tuesday? If you watch his rallies or read the transcripts from them, he talks a lot about control of Congress, not coming out and voting for Republicans. According to the president, is a vote for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker of the House and Chuck Schumer as Senate Majority Leader. The president also talks about Kavanaugh and the caravan. The president thinks the Democrats have overplayed their hands on both issues, particularly on the Kavanaugh issue, so he has made it a central focus of his campaign rallies. The crowd at his rallies, they certainly enjoy the president lambasting crying Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and the legendary Maxine Waters. The president characterizes their political positions as wanting to raise your taxes, restore regulations, and shut down your steel mill and take away your real health care, while using socialism to turn America into Venezuela, while totally opening your borders. That's according to the president. Interesting to hear a president of the United States speak about the political party opposing him as embracing socialism. This is somewhat of a different turn of events. We typically have not heard our presidents refer to the opposing party or a Republican president referring to the Democratic Party as socialist. We're hearing that more and more out of the president and many Republicans running for the Senate and the House. But as far as how is the president framing the debate, he also talks a lot about immigration and border security. And on yesterday in the state of Indiana during the rally, the president hammered Democrats for being weak on illegal immigration and tough on ICE. The president says a blue wave would equal a crime wave, while a red wave equals jobs and security. The president frequently refrains jobs, not mobs. Trump says Democrats want to turn America into a sanctuary city, while Republicans believe America should be a sanctuary for citizens. The president says border security is also a women's issue because they want criminals thrown in jail or thrown the heck out of the country, according to the president. And I think the president is right to remark upon the fact that immigration reform, border security is is an issue that does appeal to women as well as men. Typically in the media, it's explained to us that the Trump tough stance on immigration is done in order to connect to the president's core group of male voters, particularly rural male and suburban male voters. But also, women are equally as concerned about ensuring that our borders are secure and that criminals are not able to walk across, as regrettably they've done so frequently. And so the president is focusing on immigration and border control to appeal to women as well as men. And the president sticking with his arguably most popular political position. It's certainly one of the most important policy positions that he ran on during his campaign and helped get him elected to the presidency, which is his tough stance on immigration. Interestingly, conservative columnist and commentator Ann Coulter had repeatedly argued that this issue, immigration, is why Trump won not just the primary election, but also the general election. And it's a critical issue facing the country, but also a very good issue for Republicans to run on. And the president has embraced it wholeheartedly. Of course, many of our friends in the establishment, so to speak, Paul Ryan, for example, they want to focus on tax cuts. That's about probably one of the few conservative positions many of our friends in the establishment actually espouse. But, about 47% of the American people don't pay federal income taxes. So tax cuts are not particularly important to them. At least they don't directly affect almost half of the American people. So when our friends in the Republican establishment talk about why the American people should elect them to elective office because they're going to cut their taxes, well, those calls fall on deaf ears to about nearly half of the American people. And it's the president who figured out what are the most important issues confronting a majority of the American people, and immigration is forefront on that list. And so that's why he's featuring it in his campaign rallies, even though the economy is doing extremely well. And the president does talk about how well the economy is doing, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. That doesn't mean that he's not going. The fact that the economy is doing so well doesn't mean that the president's going to ignore his signature political issue on immigration, because that resonates so well with the American people. And the president talking about immigration and border security in terms of safety is also very important. And the president is talking about how that appeals to women voters. And our friends in the media are always talking about how Republicans need to connect to the so-called soccer moms in the suburbs of the metropolitan areas, and how we Republicans don't do well among soccer moms. But here the president is choosing an issue that I think, and some other conservative commentators also believe, does resonate with suburban so-called soccer moms who want their communities to be safe and crime-free. And part of that means we have to have a secure border so that we're not allowing criminal gangs, MS-13, child smugglers, human traffickers into our country. We'll talk more about the president's rallies and the upcoming Tuesday election when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Let's get back to The Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to The Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial where we talk about the important legal and political issues of the day. We try to put America first in our discussions and conversations. You're welcome to call in at 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580. You can also follow us on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live, and you can comment, and we'll read your comments on the air as long as they're nice comments about the show. For example, Harry just commented, "I love your show. I ended my call with my girlfriend to listen to you." Well, I want to thank you, Harry. That's very kind of you. I'm not sure that's the best thing for your relationship. You may want to give her a call during the commercial break, at least. But thank you so much for listening. We're talking about the election coming up on Tuesday and President Trump and the various political rallies he's been attending for many weeks now, trying to get out the vote for Republican candidates across the country. And we're talking about how the president's framing the election issues in the next couple of days to get his supporters and Republicans out to vote. Traditionally, the party of the president loses the first midterm election. We'll see if President Trump can break that cycle that's been with us for a long time now. And I'm just commenting on how our friends in the Republican establishment usually will stay away from the issue of immigration. That's because they depend upon the large donations from their corporate benefactors and big business and the Chamber of Commerce to keep our borders open and keep those new workers flooding across the border and up into the U.S. To take those jobs that, according to corporate CEOs and Republican Party establishment figures, the American people will not take. So our friends in the establishment will shy away from a tough immigration position and instead talk about tax cuts. And Mitt Romney running on tax cuts, as you'll recall. But 47% of the American people don't pay federal income taxes. So when our friends in the Republican establishment say, go out and vote Republican because we'll cut your taxes, well, that falls on deaf ears to nearly half of the American voters. It's President Trump who has picked up on the most critical, I think, issue of our times, and that is this mass immigration and open borders. And the president's saying, wait a second, we've got to slow things down here. We've got to reduce the immigration. We've got to protect our borders. We have to know who's coming into our country. After all, America has suffered terrible, devastating terrorist attacks over the past couple of decades, many of which were instigated and perpetrated by foreign nationals from Saudi Arabia and other countries around the world who wished America harm and actually harmed America in horrible ways. One of the president's first actions when he took the Oval Office was the executive order to establish the ban on individuals coming into our country from a few countries around the world that had significant problems with terrorism and did not have the structure in place in those countries to properly vet those individuals who wanted to come from there to America. So this has been a signature issue of the president's, and he's doing, I think, a pretty fantastic job keeping it forefront in the people's minds as we move into Election Day. And it's interesting to see which of our congressional and Senate candidates have also talked about the issue and which have shied away from it. But it's important, and I think it's also something that Republicans can do to reach out to the so-called soccer mom suburban female voter that for decades, at least when I was very much involved in politics, that was so much of what we talked and discussed was how are we going to attract the suburban female voters who may not embrace more of the conservative platforms of the party. And might be more moderate on the social issues and might swing and vote for Democrats. But I think the president's found it on the issue of immigration. Our female voters, women voters, just like men, they want security, they want safety. They're very much concerned about having these open borders, about thousands, tens of thousands of individuals crossing our border. We've got caravans now in the thousands. And who are these people that want to come into our country? And the American people are right to want to know. And we're concerned about the high crime rate among illegal aliens. We're concerned about the massive amount of drugs pouring across our open borders, about the human and child smuggling operations run by these coyotes, these men who are bringing in these illegal aliens into our country. We're concerned about the brutal gangs such as MS-13, worried about criminal illegal aliens in our country who've committed brutal crimes in the U.S. They've been deported, and then they keep coming back. Kate Steinle, remember that 32-year-old young lady, Kate Steinle in San Francisco, walking with her father along Pier 14 there, shot by a an individual, Jose Inez Garcia Zarate. He was a felon in possession of a firearm. He is a Mexican national, an illegal alien in our country who was deported from the U.S. a total of 5 times. Most recently in 2009, he was on probation in Texas at the time of the shooting. He had 7 felony convictions in the U.S., yet he was on the pier in San Francisco and ended the life of that beautiful young woman. And that, I think, is what many women are concerned about, and that's why I think the president is right to address the issue this way. Well, let's take some phone calls. We got some people calling in. Some listeners want to get their points across, so let's take some calls. We have John from York. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show. And what do you think about how the president's framing the debate as we move much closer toward Election Day?
Well, I might have a slightly different opinion on it, and please feel free to object if you want to. I'm not coming at this from a Democrat or Republican viewpoint or a liberal or conservative viewpoint. I don't like labels. I don't want to be labeled in any way. I'm trying to come at it, and I'm not the best Christian in the world. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm trying to come at it from a biblical viewpoint. In Matthew, for example, 25, where Jesus said, I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I can't help but believe that 95% or more of these refugees coming from Central America and other parts of the world too, they're not criminals. They wouldn't walk for criminals wouldn't be industrious enough to walk for hundreds or thousands of miles just to come to the country to commit a crime. They'd come by plane, by boat, there's other ways to come quicker. I think most of these people are fleeing violence, extreme poverty, persecution. They're trying to save the lives of themselves and their families. It's a life and death matter for a lot of them. And they're trying to find jobs and ways to support their families. And these are the people I think we should be accepting and giving amnesty to and helping and welcoming. Now, maybe people that might say I'm crazy, but I think we should be welcoming a lot of them because I think the large majority are good people who are trying to help their families and are trying to run away from situations that I wouldn't even be able to take for 24 hours. I mean, they're trying to find freedom, peace, and so forth, and life and health, and I think we should help them. I think we should give them, the word is amnesty, I guess, and then there's another word, too, I'm trying to think of, I can't think of. But I think we should open our country to them. Here's another thing. I'll get off here in a minute. I've been in touch a lot with Church World Service in Lancaster County, and they'll tell you that in Lancaster, per capita, there's more refugees than most any other place in the country, and the crime rate among them is very low. I mean, they're doing wonderful things for the community, and they're just doing wonderful things, and they're good people. And well, that's my comment.
Well, John, I want to thank you for calling, and of course,
Sure.
you're not insane. You're far from it. You're a listener of the Mark Scaringi Show, so you must
Yeah.
be logical, rational, and far above average, right?
Well, I don't know. One would hope.
And I want to thank you.
I like your show, even though I often, I sometimes disagree with viewpoints, but that's okay. You get me thinking anyway. But
Well,
I think we should help these people and welcome them. And most of them, 95% or more, I don't want to repeat myself, are good people. They're not criminals. I don't know why President Trump is indicating that they are. If they were gang members, they would come into the country in a lot faster way. And certainly we don't want gang members here or people like that. But most of them are not. And I mean, to go to the trouble to walk all these miles and to experience the suffering that they have and that they're suffering now, they certainly need our help.
Well, let me try to respond to the points that you
Okay.
raised, John, and thanks
Okay.
and thanks again for calling. And you haven't called in a while, and we used to hear you. You would call every Saturday at noon when I had the noon hour. But we're so glad that you've called in today. Otherwise, I would feel lonely and abandoned if you didn't call in as regularly as you did. But remember, Jesus Christ is not running the United States of America. We love Christ, but he's not our president. He's not in charge of our government. And I believe Christ said that his kingdom was not of this world. So that our immigration policy was not written by Jesus or any of his disciples. It's written by the men and women we elect to serve us in the United States Congress. And you're talking about all of these refugees in Lancaster County, and comparing those refugees in Lancaster County who are here under our refugee and asylum laws, who have gone through all of the vetting process that's involved, is very dissimilar to the thousands of mostly men in those caravans coming up from Honduras. The 99.9% of the people in the thousands of people in that caravan are not refugees. They're not asylees. They don't fit the definition. They're simply migrants who are leaving their third world impoverished countries and wanting to come up into the United States, into the first world, into the greatest welfare state in the world, where we give out more welfare benefits per capita than any other country on the planet. They're not asylees or refugees. They're economic migrants. So it's two very, very different things we're talking about. We'll talk more about this when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Now, more of Mark Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. We're talking about President Trump's rallies over the past couple of weeks, the rapidly approaching Election Day, how the president's framing the issues. He's talking about a lot about immigration and border security. The president's also bragging about the economy. The New York Times said yesterday that President Trump's high-pressure economy is the best time for the American labor market in at least 18 years, and maybe closer to 50 years. That's the liberal New York Times, who often spars with the president, really running up a beautiful article on how well the Trump economy is doing. The economy added 250,000 jobs in October. The unemployment rate held steady at 3.7%. That's the lowest level of joblessness in 49 years. Over the past 12 months, employers added an average of 211,000 jobs each month. Average hourly earnings climbed again for the month. That represents a 3% gain. The first time wages have grown more than 3% year over year. Weekly unemployment claims have fallen again. Ongoing claims have dropped to the lowest level since 1973. The U.S. added 32,000 new manufacturing jobs alone in October. That's 1,000 jobs, manufacturing jobs, every day. The United States in energy is pumping record amounts of crude oil, vaulting over Russia to become the world's largest producer of crude oil. I mean, the economy is doing so well. The president's talking about the economy. The president's talking about immigration. Let's hear what our listeners are talking about and what they think the most important issues are that are going to drive these election results come Tuesday. We'll talk to Philip from Wiccanisco. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Mark, I tend to agree with you. I looked at two things the other day. I looked at the caravan coming over, and then I looked at a song called From a Distance. And From a Distance shows these poor little children, and they're in Africa. And I looked at these little things, and they were skin and bones. That's poverty, man. And it brought tears to my eyes. I looked at the ones in the caravan. They have like 16-inch biceps, and they're using the women and children as shields. That's not the same as my little African country, which, being a Sicilian American, my roots go back to Northern Africa, being 50% Sicilian American, And when I look at that, they're the real starving people, They're the ones that break my heart when I see them. I see a little child with skin and bones reaching out with their hands. It brings me to tears. But when I see people marching with a flag toward my country, and they're big and they're strong and they're tough and they can scale walls and everything, and the backpacks they're carrying are worth more than I am. The Crocs shoes are $60. Oh, this is a put on, man. This is a put on. I just came to your rescue, Mark. You owe me one.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.
Could I make another couple comments if you don't mind?
Yes, go ahead quickly.
Okay. Right now, I'd love to be able to vote, but due to the flooding of my property and everything, and my township with Mr. Coles being a jerk and a jackass, I can't even vote because I won't be here. I won't be here. The township has its own laws, and nobody can help me with them, and I'm fresh out of everything. So I wish you guys luck. I think you're going to win even without my help.
All right, Philip, thanks for calling. Appreciate that. Yeah, those very strong young men in that Honduran caravan that's approaching our country, they've rioted along the way. Remember, they stormed the fence between Guatemala and Mexico. They have essentially pushed aside the Mexican army. This is not what Philip was describing with regard to the dilemma in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa with the endemic poverty and starvation there, and your heart goes out to those individuals, and you want to provide charitable relief to them in their countries. But that doesn't mean that we kind of scoop them all up and bring them in to the United States and put them on charitable relief here. It doesn't make any sense. The men in the Honduran caravan that's marching its way through Mexico, apparently undeterred by the Mexican army, the Mexican police, they're not able to secure their borders. They're headed this way, and there are significant elements of crime and criminals involved. I was watching one interview on Fox News, and the interviewer pulled a gentleman aside who was marching in the caravan and interviewed him, and he asked, "Why are you going to the U.S.?" And the caravaner, as some have called them, said, "Well, he was convicted of a felony in the U.S., and he wants to return to the U.S. to ask the president for a pardon, or to ask for a pardon for his felonious crime." The crime apparently was attempted murder. So this particular gentleman from Honduras has already been in the U.S., committed the crime known as attempted murder, which is a pretty bad crime as far as crimes go. You don't want to try to kill anybody when you're here. That's a bad thing. But that's apparently what this gentleman from Honduras did when he was in the U.S., and apparently perhaps was deported or maybe just walked back to Honduras. And now he's on his way back to the U.S. Requesting a pardon. So let's open up the phone lines, and we'll take some more calls. Richard from Mechanicsburg, you're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Hi there. John, when he called, has a very good heart and is in touch with the Lord, and that's a marvelous, wonderful thing. I would just recommend that he might want to pray a little more for wisdom to add to that wonderful heart, and he'd be a powerful force here on the earth. Real quick, the best deal for everybody in this, the people trying to come here and the people who are here. If you're familiar with the Heifer Project, you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't. Tell us about it.
It's going through lots of churches where they collect money here. They would buy heifers or sheep or guinea pigs because someplace that's, an economic, food source. And they would transport them to Africa, South America, and give them to people. And they would raise them. And then they would actually have something in the heifers. They would grow into cows, and they actually use cows for plowing the field. And if you had that one had a heifer, then you would give that to the neighbor. It's like those micro-loan things where we give them something. And then for a few years, they figured out, if we collect money in the United States, the dollar still has some power. If we go to the local economy and buy the heifers there, buy the guinea pigs there, buy the goats there, we stimulate the economy, which is what we're trying to do. And we don't have the transportation cost. And you could probably buy 10 cows for what you could buy a cow for here. So from a good stewardship standpoint, the best thing we'd do for people coming here for asylum and refugee is to say, look, rather than transport you from like Syria to Erie, where the climate is substantially different, the culture is different, and pay U.S. prices for the things that to keep them alive, take the money from the United States, provide the soldiers that we're sending to the border someplace to provide a safe and secure area and get more bang for the buck in the local economy. That's just the most civilized thing. And this lawsuit that they're coming up to, that the president's violating their constitutional right by preventing the United States Constitution applies to United States citizens. I'll let your next callers in. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Richard. Appreciate those comments. And Richard makes an interesting point, and that is, yes, there has already been a lawsuit filed by our friends in the Honduran caravan they've already sued us. They've sued President Trump and high-ranking members of his cabinet because they don't like the president talking about building tent cities. So they're suing the president about the accommodations they expect to have and receive when they illegally cross the border with their fake asylum claims. They want to have certain accommodations, and so they're not even here yet, and they've sued our president. So your tax dollars at work. The Department of Justice, of course, will defend the lawsuit, so you'll be paying all of those attorneys in the Department of Justice to defend against the lawsuit filed by a group of Hondurans somewhere in Mexico and looking to come into our country, and they want a federal district court judge to rule on the type of accommodations they are entitled to, I guess, once they illegally cross the border into the U.S. So I want to thank the caller for pointing out that the Honduran caravanners, as they're referred to in the lawsuit, have already sued the American people because they want they want a certain class of accommodation in these when they get to the U.S. and they don't like the idea of Trump's tents that the president is apparently putting up, waiting for their arrival. We'll take one more call quickly before the next commercial break. Jack from New Cumberland, you're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Yeah, I'm referring to your first caller. I think his name was John. It sounds very noble and sanctimonious to make quotations from Scripture, although that quotation he made is absolutely irrelevant to this situation. I don't want to get into biblical discussion here, but it's a prophetic statement having to do with the nation of Israel. The main reason I've called, though, is this. That lawsuit would hit the circular file, so fast when it arrived here that it would be unbelievable. But the whole idea of these people coming to this country actually shaking down the American taxpayer and providing no net benefit for this country, I think is outrageous. I just absolutely think this is outrageous. These people should be turned around and sent back. And as a matter of fact, I called earlier, not today, but back a number of weeks ago, not one dime, not 1 cent would be provided for them or for any other illegal immigrant in this country for any purpose, education, even hospitalization. Let them go back to where they came from. I never personally have been ashamed of being born in America here. That was a stroke of fate that I appreciate. I thank God for it, but I don't owe those people anything.
Hey, Jack, I got to cut to a commercial break. I want to thank you for calling. You raised some very good points that are being echoed by the President of the United States himself, who's saying the very same thing. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Mark Scaringi Show. We're going to take a brief commercial break.
Now, more of Mark Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show. We're talking about the elections coming up. The president has been rallying across the country in support of his Republican candidates. He's trying to drive the voters to the polls on Tuesday. And the president's talking about immigration and border security a lot on the stump. He's also talking about the stellar economy that the American people are experiencing. And we're debating those issues as well. You can call in 717-540-0580. You can also see us on Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live if you're a friend or a follower, and you can comment live, and we're reading some of those comments. We've had some good discussions. Our friend John from York always generates lots of calls in response to the statements that he makes on immigration. But I want to change gears away from immigration if I can. We have some callers on queue who want to talk about immigration, but let's see if we can change the topic and focus on the important congressional and Senate races coming up. The election day is on Tuesday, the Real Clear Politics average. And here's what the Real Clear Politics average of polls, this is what they're indicating, that in the United States Senate, the Republicans will pick up 1 seat. In the House, Democrats will pick up 26 seats. And in the governor's mansions across the country, Democrats will pick up 6. So it's not looking good according to the Real Clear Politics average for Republicans right now. And I don't think things are going to change too much in the next 3 days. So some of the important Senate seats in North Dakota, Kevin Cramer, the Republican, versus Heidi Heitkamp, the Democratic incumbent. And in that case, Cramer has an average, he's 11.4% above the incumbent Democratic U.S. Senator. So that looks like a likely pickup in the Senate, North Dakota, that is, for Republicans. And Missouri now is too close to call. Josh Hawley, the Republican challenger, versus Claire McCaskill, the Democratic incumbent. Real Clear Politics average, it's a toss-up, it's a tie, too close to call. Here at home in Pennsylvania for governor, we have the incumbent Tom Wolf versus the challenger Scott Wagner, the Republican former state senator from York County. The Real Clear Politics average has Governor Tom Wolf up by 19.6%. Wow. That's a whopping lead the Governor Wolf enjoys over Scott Wagner, according to Real Clear Politics. Also, in the U.S. Senate here in Pennsylvania, Real Clear Politics average, Bob Casey, the incumbent Democratic senator, up 14.3% over the challenger U.S. Congressman Lou Barletta. Let's look at some of the key House races in Pennsylvania, and we can talk about my own House seat. I live in Cumberland County, and I'm wonderfully represented by Scott Perry, our incumbent Republican congressman from the 10th Congressional District, the new 10th Congressional District. Real Clear Politics ranks it as a toss-up. Now, but Perry is up. Congressman Perry is up by 2.5% on average, according to Real Clear Politics. So, interestingly, President Trump won the 10th district by almost 9% and Romney by 6.6%. Now, President Trump has come out strongly for Congressman Perry. President Trump tweeted yesterday his support for Scott Perry. Trump tweeted, "Scott Perry of Pennsylvania is fantastic. He's strong on the border, crime, the military, our vets, and the Second Amendment. Scott has my total endorsement." Uncle Joe Biden, former Vice President of the United States, sometimes referred to as Uncle Joe, sometimes referred to as Crazy Uncle Joe. He's coming to Harrisburg tomorrow. He'll be at the Farm Show Complex to rally for George Scott, who is the challenger to the incumbent Scott Perry. And that will be a fascinating race. It looks like it's going to be very, very close. It's going to come down to the wire. And let's see if one of my favorite congressmen, Scott Perry, let's see if he can pull it out. I sure hope he can, and I'm sure a lot of my listeners are in his corner. Let's open up the phones, and we'll take some calls, and we'll about the election coming up this Tuesday. Jeff from Lancaster, you're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Jeff from Lancaster, you're on the Mark Scaringi Show. Who do you think is going to win, the Republicans or the Democrats, on Tuesday?
I think the Republicans are going to actually surprise you, and the election could be swayed by the overturning the redistricting in Pennsylvania, which is an en banc appeal in the U.S. Court of Appeals, 18-1816. And it's still there. It's in an en banc appeal. And the reason it should be overturned is it turns out that the president of the League of Women Voters got arrested protesting the Kavanaugh hearings and then came out with a press release that said, we feel that we don't have to be balanced and fair when protesting Mr. Kavanaugh, and therefore we believe it's appropriate, which means their entire case that brought about the redistricting in Pennsylvania was a lie. And if you lie in court, the whole thing should be overturned.
Well, Jeff from Lancaster, I want to thank you for calling and pointing out the League of Women Voters. The one of their high-ranking officers there was involved in the protesting against Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the United States Supreme Court. We love our friends, the League of Women Voters, but we know they are left-leaning. They're a left-leaning organization, yet ironically, They are usually tapped to be involved in sponsoring and moderating debates, political debates in Pennsylvania and across the country, and they're a wonderful organization, but they are to the left, so they're not as impartial as one would like. Let's open up the phone lines again, and we'll take some more calls. Whit from Camp Hill, you're on the Mark Scarinci Show.
Yeah, Mark. I got a couple good ideas here, which I'm sure you've heard of, the nunc-pro-tunc doctrine and also the grandfather doctrine. Both of them apply to my ideas here for solving this illegal immigration problem as they've been dealt with in the past. I watched a documentary just a few nights ago on Donald Trump's family, and when his mother came over here from Scotland in the 1930s, and it stated on that program that she went through Ellis Island. I've never been to Ellis Island, but from what I understand, it's just a tourist trap here, and they have paid governmental employees that are giving people a guided tour around the island. And in my opinion, all that real estate and expenses that it's costing to maintain that no longer used Ellis Island program, that should be reinitiated again and fully re-implement the Ellis Island immigration screening program at Ellis Island again, as it was operated for many years and when Donald Trump's mother came here. And they could just do the program the same way I was subjected to in the late 1970s when I attempted to be a citizen of Canada, and I was told that I had to come back here to the United States, file the proper paperwork, stating that I was fully able to pay for all of my expenses and everything, that I could survive up there in Canada as a citizen without any undue financial burdens to the Canadian government.
Hey, Whit, I want to listen to more. I want to listen more about your story. Maybe we'll talk with you online and get more details about it. It's an interesting story, but I want to get some other callers in here quickly. I only have 1 or 2 minutes left. I want to talk to Matt from York County. You're on the Mark Scarinci Show. Who do you think is going to win on Tuesday?
I think the Republicans are going to hold on to the Senate, and I believe it's going to be very close, but I think we're going to keep the majority in the House of Representatives.
And how do you think how do you think the governor's race in Pennsylvania is going to shape up with the incumbent governor Tom Wolf about 19, 20 points ahead of our own Scott Wagner?
Well, it depends on who you ask. Some of these polls have shown Scott Wagner behind by 3 points, give or take, which is definitely in the margin of error. And then there's been others that have a much larger gap, like you just mentioned. It's just going to come down to turnout, and that's why I wanted to quickly mention something to you called Find Your Five. I created a website called findyour5.org. They can put it in their toolbar, their search bar, www.findyour5.org. The idea is to go and coach or mentor 5 people on Tuesday. Find them immediately. As soon as you hear this, hang up your phone, find 5 people from the radio off, find 5 people that you can walk through the election on Tuesday, because it's all going to be about turnout.
Well, we're on it. Matt from York, thanks for calling. It's 5 for 5.
Find your 5.
Find your 5. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Findyour5.com. Get on the website and find your 5 friends, families, and neighbors who you are going to get out to the polls on Election Day on Tuesday. Hopefully you'll find 5 Republican friends and neighbors, but Democrats too. We want everybody to get out there and vote. That is our right as U.S. citizens. It's the most critical part of our democratic republic that we all go out on Election Day, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, or any of the other political parties. But show your interest in helping to govern our country. We're a self-governing republic, and you can prove that on Election Day by getting out to vote.
Your Saturdays just got a lot more interesting. Mark Scarinci Show is on WHP 580 at 1 p.m. every Saturday. Hi, I'm attorney Mark Scarinci. If you're passionate about your rights and freedoms and want to make America great again, I welcome you to participate in my politically charged forum that puts America first. You can join in Saturday afternoons at 1 right here on WHP 580 AM, online at WHP580.com, and on the iHeartRadio app.